You're listening to the Slavic Literature Pod, your shelf help guide to all things Slavic. I'm Cameron Lavana.
And I'm Matt Garasinovich.
And today we're covering Part 2, Chapter 11, continuing on with Lieutenant Peter Box. I don't want to say if I want to call it transformation. His evolution from Stalingrad.
I wouldn't call it that, yeah.
Neither would I. Yeah, in Stalingrad, he's sort of this kind of sardonic character who sees the ridiculousness of the German army and also some of the strangeness, and he's kind of an outsider, but he's still not enough of an outsider to leave or do something else. And now in this book, he is fully leaning into, man, I never thought I'd be drinking with the SS guys, but here I am, and maybe it's right. Maybe I should join the party. And we continue to see how that gets expressed. And I'm really excited to get into this one. I think this is an interesting theme. This is one of those things where it's like an underlying philosophy that really grows from Stalingrad to this book, and I'm excited to talk about it. Is there anywhere in particular that you would like to begin?
Honestly, I wanted to be lazy and throw it back to you because you sounded excited about this one. And I think I was saying before the episode, I think I accidentally talked about part of this one last night. I think I may have had my bookmark in the wrong spot and thought that this was all one large chapter. So, yeah, what are you going to do?
To be fair, the last chapter is all about the German soul, and this one just kind of expands on that idea. So it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of similar, and it does go into similar issues. But I was curious what was striking to you about this one.
Yeah, definitely. So I think this is a theme that is not really being addressed verbally or like explicitly, I should say, in Life and Fate in Stalingrad is a longer question of Slavic literature, which is, of course, что делать? What is to be done? Let's go back to Chernyshevsky. You have, as we all should, you have Chernyshevsky being like, hey, maybe because the wretchedness of the citizens of the Russian Empire, maybe that's actually created by the conditions they live in and not because they are inherently bad people, and that's why they deserve to be poor and dirty. And a lot of other things snowball in, and then we get to this idea of the Soviet state, the idea of we're creating a new Soviet man, the Homo Sovieticus, and we are going to use the state to make a better quality of person. That is an argument which exists throughout Stalingrad. It is just explicitly in a conversation between Victor Strum and his teacher Trapezin, where Trapezin argues that what kind of wool has been thrown over the German people's eyes, and then Victor comes back in with the roundhouse and says, "You fool! But if fascism can't make people worse, then we accept implicitly that communism also can't make people better, because we're saying that ideology can't fundamentally change the human soul, the human character, and this is something we want." And you'll notice that idea is completely absent from Life and Fate. In fact, Victor at one point even rebukes that idea. He thinks of that conversation with Trapezin and wonders how he could have ever made that. It seemed like that is a completely different Victor. And now we have Bach, this character who was sort of an outsider and meant to display what the German army was like and why that was bad in comparison to the Red Army in Stalingrad. And there, now he is becoming an adherent, an actual party member, and he's not the most fanatical. Certainly he doesn't think it's good that they're carrying out the Holocaust, but of course he's got Jewish friends himself. But as it says in the text, he had to admit that there was such a thing as a German soul and a German character, which meant there must also be a Jewish soul and a Jewish character. So we're reading this idea of reinforcing that national identity is a real thing, and he leaves the implication there unfulfilled. He doesn't say, so therefore we should do it, but that is the implication there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk a lot about the state here, and why I think it's interesting to talk about this idea of people being changed is you might understand it as fascism changing Bach, but I don't think that's the case. And I think we actually see something more frightening here in the Hell of Treblinka, when Grossman is writing about fascism. He writes that, and I'm quoting from a memory, I haven't read Hell of Treblinka in a long time, but basically that fascism allows the worst parts of humanity to come to the surface, the most wolfish parts. Now, that could be the most wolfish people, as it is in the case of the SS guards in the Hell of Treblinka, but he also, and I think he kind of covers this in in the Systema Donna as well, it brings the wolfish characters to the fore, right? Not truly changing people. People are not changed. In fact, they adapt to their environment. And that's why I think this is kind of scary, because you actually have Bach in this part articulate the idea that the state creates the person. As he says, the state is not an effect, it is a cause. The law that determines the birth of a nation state is something miraculous and wonderful. A state is a living unity. It alone has power to express what is most precious, what is truly immortal in millions of people: a German character, a German heart, a German will, a German spirit of sacrifice. So what is individual, again, as we've been talking about in this book, is sacrificed on the altar of totality in the fascist state. And so what begins to happen, what we're seeing here, is not actually the state, although people conceive of the state changing them, the people state as this sort of immortal being, which it's not. They begin to adapt themselves around this idea, and they begin to make themselves worse because of it. Bach is not a fanatic, but Bach is someone who is considering joining the party. Bach could be among the worst offenders, truly, because he is clearly an intelligent guy. And yet, for all of that, he looks at the German state. He knows Jewish people, and still he looks at it and says, well, I mean, obviously this is kind of bloody, and maybe we have to sacrifice poetry, and I have to sacrifice my friends. And there's this Russian woman at the end who comes to see him with some apparent genuine affection, and he has to turn her away. He has to turn everything what is true in his life. I'm going to go ahead and say that friends, someone who's interested in you, poetry, art, those are all true things. And then he sacrifices that at the altar of the state. And that's why he is the most scary, not because he's the most fanatical, but because he should and can know better, and yet still chooses to adapt himself around the state. The state is not truly changing him. He is simply adapting his own self, not really changing yourself. And that's a more frightening thing, that you don't need to be changed to be worse, that you can be a smart, intelligent person and still come to these conclusions, and still and not only full-heartedly endorse the elimination of the Jewish people, but merely accept it. And they're both horrible and awful. But there's something, I guess, honest about fanaticism, about genuine hatred. There's something terrible and cold about someone just saying, well, sure, why not, to genocide?
Yeah, the conclusion that he leaves off on at the end, saying that the most extraordinary thing of all is that whereas for years I felt I was being suppressed by the state, I now understand that it alone can give expression to my soul. And I thought that was such a really kind of horrifying way to leave off on that. And to sort of even unpack what it means to give expression to your soul, I'm still not 100% sure. Because I agree with you really in full that it's not about, an expression of the soul in its fullest, most total, unbounding sense. It is that sort of chiseling away of what makes you kind of unique, and to be willingly subsumed by the state or by your ideology, where it just kind of, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
This
no,
is one of those parts that still gives me pause.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can draw a line here to the true apparatchiks who, much like Getmanov, who lets himself be sublimated to the needs of the state. Bach is not only accepting of it, he is an enthusiastic adherent of sacrificing the self on the altar of the state. And some people conceive of this kind of 1984, the state comes and takes it to you, but it's much more frightening, I think, personally, to have
Well, it's
willingly throw that all
different.
away.
It's different though, because Geminov is he's a political operator in the sense that he is trying to sort of advance his career. I think he understands the material advantages that come along with being in a position of power in Soviet society.
For sure.
Bach kind of is lacking a sense of belonging. And I think that's where that expression of the soul comes from. And so fascism clearly does a better job of picking up sort of the disaffected, the sort of people who feel like they have the sense of being an outcast and not quite fitting in, and and coercing them towards feeling like they fit in, even if they don't quite. And so I don't think he's not motivated in the same way as Getmanov. I don't think they might serve the same function, but they don't ultimately Yeah, I don't know. They're not quite the same.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a very fair point too.
Yeah. I still, it's not necessarily that like one is better. They're both bad and both have the power to do bad things from wherever their position is. Um, it's just kind of like you're saying, like I think Getmanov, the thing that's kind of sinister about him is that like he knows what he's doing, whereas the thing that's horrifying about Bach is that he kind of I don't I don't know. I know you said it was intentional. Oh, I think you said it was intentional, but for me, it's kind of this I don't know, maybe letting yourself give in to the sort of comfort that an ideology can provide you,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not sort of challenged as much, you're kind of swept up into this larger idea, and it becomes very comfortable for you there. Um, that's different. I don't think Gaminov really. Maybe he's a believer. I don't know. I don't think he's not like buying into it. It seems to me in the same way that Bach sort of is.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think this is one of those ways in which the parallels actually highlight really important differences too. I completely agree with you that Getmanov is like, I think he's like a true bureaucrat, right? He's doing what he wants because
Yeah,
he's getting ahead in a bureaucratic system.
it's not an
That's what it
expression
brings
of
him.
his soul, but he would never say that. It's an expression of power. That's it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just nuts to think of the state as the expression of your soul.
Right. And the other interesting thing about Bach is that you see these international, all the ways in which you how do I phrase this? He has such an interesting canvas of his life, right? Because he's got parents who are Marxists. He has sort of had this attraction to a Russian woman. He has Jewish friends. He knows the humanity in all these people. He could easily know it. And yet, like you said, some level of disaffectation, some level of disconnect, whatever it is, has disconnected him from what is human in the many people around him. And now, not out of hatred, but out of boredom, whatever it is, condemns all of them to death.
Yeah, you know, we'll keep chewing on it, keep talking on it. I'd love to hear other people's interpretations in our Discord or on Instagram or wherever. Um, this to me, I agree though, is like the most interesting part of the book. One of them for sure is kind of looking at how Grossman is working out these two differences on a very small scale individual level, and seeing where that can be expanded on. Because I think there's still, even though we're talking about one individual person, it's so incredibly relevant still.
Yeah. Some of these parts really felt like change out the words and the sentiments are things I've certainly seen expressed, unfortunately.
Yeah, just like go on Twitter and you will see you will see everything that Grossman is talking about. It's still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amplified for sure.
Yeah. Studying politics, anyone who's studied politics has certainly run into some dude, invariably a guy.
Anyone studying politics, you're part of the problem.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you've all run into someone like Bach.
We're part of the problem. We're shutting down.
We're shutting down. We've decided to do the only thing that's right for us as former politics students to do and shut down the podcast and stop
Shut
speaking
down the
forever.
podcast. Honestly, wouldn't be our worst idea.
Yeah, but we could probably keep talking, but maybe we should shut it down here for now.
I think so. I think that's all of what I had to say for tonight. So in that case, it sounds like you may or may not hear from us again soon.
Hey, 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 hey.